and welcome to Trail Talk Live. I'm Meghan Reddick, Interim CEO of Trans-Canada Trail. Thanks for joining today's discussion as we talk about how trails can be a catalyst for human connection. I'm pleased to be here today with Pete Bombaci, founder and executive director of the GenWell Project, a human connection movement that champions face-to-face social connection. Welcome, Pete.
Great to be here, Meghan. Thank you.
And I'm also very excited to be here with Joannie Rochette, former Olympic figure skater who, as you all know, won the bronze medal at the 2010 Vancouver Games. And if that's not enough, Joannie is now a doctor completing her residency in Montreal. I am a big fan. Merci d'avoir parlé avec nous aujourd'hui, Joannie. Bienvenue. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So here we are online, not face-to-face. I recognize the irony of our topic because I'm speaking to you today from Toronto. Joannie is in Montreal and Pete is in Vancouver, but at least we are connecting online. Just as the three of us are located across the country, so is the Trans-Canada Trail. So I'd like to acknowledge that the trail is situated on the traditional territory of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people from coast to coast to coast. And I want to acknowledge that the trail includes land and water routes that were created and used both historically and presently by Indigenous peoples as seasonal travel and trade routes. So we support community efforts to sustain a relationship with Indigenous peoples based on respect, dignity, trust, and cooperation in the process of advancing truth and reconciliation. I'd also like to thank, of course, our sponsor, TD Bank Group, for generously sponsoring this Trail Talk Live webinar today. Thank you, TD, for your continued support in encouraging people to get outside for the winter months, because as you're about to learn, getting outside is great for your inside. And I couldn't think of two better guests to have on the show today than Pete and Joannie. Pete is the ultimate catalyst promoting human connections through his charity, GenWell, and encourages people to talk to a stranger. And Joannie has been in skates practically her entire life, skating and competing at a very young age. So Joannie, can we start with you? As an Olympic figure skater, I know that winter activities hold a special place in your heart. So can you tell us a little bit of activities you like to get up to?
It's funny because when I was a skater, I used to hate winter. I was in the cold all the time in an arena, isolated, didn't see the sun outside. And we didn't especially wear a very warm outfit. We had a little tank top and leggings, and I hated the cold. It was not after I stopped skating, that's when I really started to enjoy the winter. Because in my career, I was not allowed to go skiing. I was not allowed to do other winter sport because my coach was always afraid I would get injured. But about 6 years ago, I got a pair of skis, my first skis ever. And during the pandemic, I got cross-country skis. And that's when it clicked. And that's when I really started to enjoy the winter. The real winter, like being outdoors, being with friends, enjoying the sun, the cold sometimes, but I was dressed for it at least.
Thank you for sharing that. It's hard to believe that you didn't like winter and here you are a figure skater. And so now you're a medical doctor in Montreal. Tell me about how you decided to pursue a career in medicine.
Well, all my career, I was trying to optimize my body, which was my working tool, trying to understand how it works, how it can better recuperate between trainings, how to optimize nutrition, sleeping, mental health, how to understand my injuries. So I think that's what prompted this. And also, my mother was a PAB. She was working in a nursing home with patients, and she always talk so highly about doctors, so that probably played a little bit into it. But yeah, I think as an athlete, that was my main reason, trying to understand how the human body works. I was always very curious about that. So when I stopped skating, I was wondering what else can I do, and applied into medicine. I didn't think I would get in. It had been 6 years since I finished my CJEP. And when I got my acceptance letter, it was, this is it. That's my chance.
Wow. That's fantastic. It's amazing. I'm always so curious how people and the origin stories of where they're going. And Pete, same with you. I've been following, as you know, the GenWell Project since the very beginning. Huge fan of your movement, and maybe you could tell everyone a little bit about that moment that made it clear for you that we were really missing important social connection with our neighbors and our community.
Yeah, and I will. So thank you, Megan. Great to be here and great to be a part of Trail Talk Live. And you are one of the original people who understood what this movement was all about, and I'm grateful for that. Back in 2016, when we launched this, it was really based off of the summer blackout of 2003. And what happened that day for anybody on the eastern seaboard, actually, Montreal was on a separate grid, so many people in Montreal didn't experience it. But 50 million people on the eastern seaboard experienced blackout anywhere from 2 to 7 days. And when we first experienced it, everybody had to get home, and we saw people walking instead of taking subways or buses because everything was shut down. But we saw the beauty of the human species initially because people were directing traffic, handing out water. It was 31 degrees. And so that was a wonderful part of it. But really, what the movement was based on is what happened next. Because we got home, we checked on our loved ones. And once we knew that everything was okay, we recognized that there was the distractions that normally take up our days were all turned off, whether that was the TV, the radio, the computer, our phones today. The reality is you couldn't do any of the things that normally distract us from human connection. So most of us went outside, and whether that was downtown, because I know people that were in tall buildings who went down to the bar and drank with people they'd never met before for 12 hours and built friendships, and there was a baby boom 9 months later. But I know communities, I know families that gathered around candlelight and had dinner. And really, that's what inspired me. Is that at 9 o'clock that night, I was at a friend's barbecue, and I was on the front porch, and the street that I was on was packed with people. And I was inspired by the fact that I assumed everybody on that street knew each other and that this was just another opportunity for them to get connected. So I walked out onto the street, and I voiced to them how inspired I was by their sense of connection and community on their street, to which they all turned around and said, we don't know each other. And I was taken aback by the response, because they looked like they were so happy. They looked like they were really enjoying each other's company. And then what I realized is that, unfortunately, because of the world that we were in, we have become so distracted, whether it's technology or longer work days or all the things that get in the way. And most of us were spending less time, which now the research is very clear, spending time face to face with people, which makes us happier, healthier, live longer, and frankly makes the societies in which we live in safer, and gives us a greater sense of connection and belonging. So that was the original inspiration behind launching the Human Connection movement.
That is, I just love that story. It is so important. And you've done research now that talks about why it's so important, right? Can you talk a little bit about that importance of social connection with people?
There's two components to this, Megan. There was research that really was probably in the 90s, a lot of it, which, showed that we needed each other and that we were more disconnected than ever before. We know about, increased risk of heart disease, diabetes, addiction, obesity, suicide, cancer, anxiety and depression. Much of this has been around for decades. It's just pre-pandemic, most of us weren't conscious of how much we needed that social connection in our lives. And I think on the positive side, the work that we've done at GenWell is really about focusing people on the solution, which, our research from the last couple of years has shown that talking to strangers, those who talk to strangers once a week are 3 times happier. Knowing your neighbor makes you less lonely. We know about friends and family, but even more surprisingly might be that our relationships with our colleagues can have a greater impact on our health and well-being than even that of our own family and friends. And so when we start to understand the science around all these connections, we start to realize the opportunities are everywhere, including when we're out on the trail.
Wow. That's amazing. And same with you, Joannie. I know that you were talking about your work connecting in long-term care homes. You were graduating medical school and the pandemic hit, and you were there and experiencing the elderly people in isolation. And can you talk about what you learned from that and how social connection is so important?
Well, the pandemic really highlighted how fragile our nursing home were in Quebec, how underfunded. And during the pandemic, all these people were left to themselves, isolated from their family. They were not allowed to go and visit them. And a lot of people who were working there had COVID, could not take care of them. So we were asked in medical school, we had no more classes. So we were asked to go and help how we could. That was really an interesting experience to see how bad the state was in. And I don't think I did their job, like being a préposé is a job on its own, but just to be there and trying to connect with these people. A lot of them are starting to have dementia, so it was not an easy time for anyone. Sometimes it was just to take a tablet and try to do a FaceTime with their loved ones that were at home, having a meal together, just talking to them. It was interesting just before starting residency to be able to witness that. And I think it kind of brought back priorities. We were studying for a big exam, and that's when you realize why you do it. It's not just about the exam or about knowing all the medical stuff, but it's about the connection and how you make these people feel. And I think it just put everything into perspective right before writing our exam.
That's so interesting. When you were working in the long-term care homes, you were talking about how you would bring out the iPad and people would be interacting and trying to help them with social connection. Can you describe a little bit about what you saw and any benefits that they had? And did you see their spirits lift?
Of course, when the nursing home patients could actually talk to their family, it changed everything. A lot of times these people enter the homes and they have a certain level of dementia and they're easily disoriented. And our goal was to reorient them, remind them there was COVID, for them to understand why they had to wear a mask, why they couldn't get out of their room, and why their family couldn't come and visit them. And it made a world of difference when they could talk to their loved ones, even if it was just on a screen. They could actually reorient them, and they have a familiar face that they could trust. So just building this connection with them, I think was what was really needed, what they were really missing during a time where families couldn't enter the nursing home. So it was interesting to see how a little action like that, just to put them in touch with their family, how it would lift their spirit and make a world of difference for them.
Yeah, there's the pandemic really did change a lot. And Pete, here you are promoting face-to-face social connection, and then we come right smack dab into a pandemic where we were told not to get out and speak. So how did that impact your movement and your message and your purpose?
Yeah, I chuckle because pre-pandemic, most people, whether it was government or healthcare or, schools, actually, I will give schools credit. Those were the ones who probably were most open to the conversation. But, very few people were interested in having this conversation because it was a new idea. We talk about social health, which is the positive, proactive, and upstream solution to improving mental health and physical health. And that was just new language, is an entire new sector of health and well-being that we've never talked about before. And unfortunately, we as a society, we tend to cling to the things that we know that are, comfortable. And so when you try to talk about a new language or talk about how we needed to think about our social health or our social connections, and when you suggested to people that this is now said to have a greater impact than exercise, eating well, sleep, water, or at least as important, it's not that the other ones aren't important, but that we need to add this in. I think it was just a shock. So the pandemic comes along. The first year, everybody was just trying to make it through. People were just trying to survive every day and figure out what was going on. But as we got to year 2 and 3, that's when the phone started to ring off the hook. And now we do, I'm in Vancouver. I just did a workshop with a corporation today. We do workshops, conference speaking, and we are truly awakening the world to just how important this message is. And again, I look at the work of the Trans Canada Trail and I say, what a great opportunity for us all to connect on the trail. Let's get out. Beautiful way to combine physical health and social health all at the same time. So now we're on the other side, and the world is awoken. And now it's still about finding and having conversations like this, which awaken more and more people to how much we actually need each other.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so true. People talk about, they get it with mental health, physical health. Social health is something that we don't talk about enough. And, we certainly see it with the digital, with your kids being, on screen all the time and having to get them off screen and outside. It's an issue for sure. Yeah. So, it's so true. Trans Canada Trail is a great place to get outside and get active. And so this is one of the main reasons we actually started our Blas to Oz campaign. It's all about encouraging people to get outside and go outside for social distant walks on the trail, and to turn their winter Blas into Oz. And thankfully, we're not in the same spot as we were back then in the pandemic, right? But it's so true that the issues of loneliness, isolation, lack of outdoor activity, it's still very, very prevalent today. So we're actually in our 4th year of this campaign. We're still encouraging people to get outside and post their videos on social media, using the hashtag Blas to Oz. So this winter, we're seeing so many responses. It's been amazing from across the country. So I want to share a little video here of some of our favorite submissions that we've received so far. So there you go. It's so great to see people out enjoying the trails this winter. Keep those photos coming. We'd love to see them, and videos, of course. So let's continue. So Joannie, from a doctor's perspective, what are some of the mental, physical health benefits that you see in people getting outside and enjoying outdoor activity?
Well, of course, there's the physical aspect of it, people being more active. As little as 30 minutes 3 times a week can diminish your risk of heart disease and make it that way. But there's more to it. When we think about someone who's healthy, we think about the biological, the physical, the social, the psychological aspect of it too. And I think that's where getting outside on the trail and connecting with people is not only good for your physical health, but also your mental health, helping connect with people. And if you go by yourself, you can just connect with nature. It allows you to slow down and have a little meditative time for yourself also. And more doctors are encouraged nowadays to prescribe it to their patient, actually, to go outside for a walk or something like that. And we see it more and more on social media. There's a lot of these groups, or social groups doing certain activities. There's one in Montreal for cross-country skiing, for biking in the summer. And it's great. It's a great way for people to meet new people. And there was actually, when I was in university, a lot of students were coming from out of province, and it was a great way for them to connect with the community and to meet new people while being active. And we know also depression, it's a big problem in the world we live in. A lot of people are taking antidepressant. Well, I think being outside in nature is a natural antidepressant, and it can be just as effective as medication.
Wow. I have heard that doctors are actually prescribing their patients with going outside, get active. That's fascinating. I think that is brilliant. They should be doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, apparently, people are more likely to do it if their doctor tell them to do so. So, why not?
And what about people with mobility issues? How do you do that as a doctor? How can you encourage people to get outside and still benefit from being in nature if you are dealing with any mobility issues?
Well, I'm not a primary care physician, but we do have the pain clinic in anesthesia, and we do see a lot of patients with arthritis or with health issues preventing them from doing their activity. But I think when I hear about these patients telling me they have an electric bike, for example, which is great because they're still active, they're still outside, and if there's steep hills, they're able to do it. Walking sticks are also great for people with gait issues, and also people just with like knee problems. And I use them now when I go hiking. I got a pair, and especially going downhill, it can protect those knees. And I think having access to the conditions of the path in advance so that they can better plan, see if it's a smooth terrain, if it's a steep hill or not, things like that can increase accessibility for people with mobility issues.
Oh, that's true. Even getting outside, from what I understand, is like 30 minutes is all you need to reap that benefit of being outdoors and connecting. And so Pete, for you, obviously you're promoting getting outside, getting active. And can you describe some ways that you are encouraging people to get out together, be active, and be social?
Well, it's so interesting. Our approach at GenWell is really about saying, look, we don't particularly care what you choose to do. It's just about getting somebody together and going and doing it. So, but when it comes to getting active, I think it really is helping people explore from the simplest way of incorporating into their daily routine. Get outside. If you've never walked before, and walking to the store at the corner is the first step for you. I think it's about recognizing and acknowledging that maybe not everybody's a runner, not everybody's a skater. I'm fortunate, and I think this is always a good way as well, which is I play hockey a couple times a week. And so it's part of my routine. And that's a big message from the GenWell Project is if we need to help people understand that whether it's social health or physical health, when we create it into a routine where it happens every week, many of us get caught up in our busy lives, lots of distractions out there. If we can put it into a routine where we know it's coming every week and that we'll always be there, then it's a greater opportunity for us to stick to a plan and do it. So whether it's the simple act of getting started or whether it's building a healthy ongoing routine, every step in the right direction is the first step for people starting today.
Yeah, that's great. And how about advice for people who may not have anyone to go out with? And your movement is about getting outside and making new friends and social connections. So, what advice do you have if someone doesn't have someone to go for a trail walk? What advice do you have for them?
Well, I think there's lots of different, there's meetup.com. There's obviously the Running Room organization that has, stores across the country. And there's lots of other running groups, walking groups, hiking groups, biking groups. And I think it is taking a couple minutes, getting online, checking out what's in your neighborhood and finding out who is or what group is getting together so that if you're looking for somebody to go do it with, you can go make it happen. But I do think that the Trans Canada Trail offers something very special. It's a type of place where lots of Canadians go when they're just looking to go out and get connected to nature. And when we talk about the benefits of talking to a stranger, I can tell you many times, you'll start with talking to a stranger. And of course, every time we talk to a stranger, even though the research shows it's nearly 100% of the time that when we talk to a stranger, both parties are happy that it happened. But if you pass one person and you just have a nod or a hello, but eventually you'll probably come across somebody, maybe they've got a dog and all of a sudden the conversation starts because of the dog. Or maybe they got, Joannie was talking about walking sticks, or maybe they've got a nice pair of shoes, or maybe their jacket is spectacular, or their hat. Strike up a conversation and start building connections along the trail. Maybe you start walking on your own, but that the trail becomes that catalyst to connecting with other people that might end up living in your community. And this could be the start of a real friendship.
Love it. Love it. It's so true. Many people don't realize how close the Trans-Canada Trail is. We're actually, there's 15,000 communities that the trail goes through across Canada. So it is a great, free, accessible space that you can just ask someone to join you for a walk or go out and meet people along the way. We know people are doing photography groups, bird watching groups along the trail, and lots of ways to kind of find someone that has the same passion that you do and to get out there. Many people too have this kind of vision that when you're walking across the world's longest trail in Canada, that you're maybe out in these remote kind of wilderness adventures, but it's actually quite easy to get out into the winter and to go, because it's in very urban sections, like where you are right now, Pete. There's the Stanley Park Seawall in Vancouver. It's part of the Trans-Canada Trail. Where I am here, we have the Martin Goodman Trail right down by the waterfront in Toronto. And obviously Joannie is the, Ville de Montréal and the Lachine Canal, and so many beautiful sections in Montreal to go visit. So yeah, we definitely agree with you, Pete. The trail is a wonderful place for social connection. Yeah. So Pete, final words of advice for people looking to get out, be active and social on the trail?
Well, I can tell you, I'm going to get out to Stanley Park right after we finish this interview, and I'll lay a testimonial down once I'm done that I'll do the number of people that I said hello to while I was on the trail. But for last tips, I think the real insight for people is that we all crave human connection. Research shows that we all underestimate the value of a simple outreach to another person. So whether you think of them as a stranger or whether it's somebody you haven't talked to in a while, whether it's an old colleague, an old friend, as you say, Meghan, hey, reach out to somebody, invite them for a walk on the trail. Everybody is, as we come out of the global pandemic, the research actually shows that 40 to 50% of Canadians will now self-identify as socially anxious, introverted, socially anxious, or shy. And some are still fearful of COVID. And so what we need to recognize is that people are struggling still. We're not out of it, and we didn't all snap back like some people had predicted during the global pandemic. So take a risk, take a chance, call up a friend, call up somebody, say hello to somebody on the street, say hello to a neighbor and say, hey, I'm thinking about going for a hike on the trail. Would you like to come and join me? And I'll bet you in the majority of cases, you'll find somebody who's more than willing to join you. And I think that's the start of, a beautiful change in this country from coast to coast.
Yeah, wow, that's so true. This is why I'm such a fan of the GenWell Project. We all should be doing that. And yeah. And Joannie, for yourself, any last minute advice to share with our listeners?
Well, just to add to what Pete already said, I think it's so great when you're in the trail and some strangers wave at you. And it's funny, I was with a friend one day and we started to cross-country ski and people kept waving. And at first I thought it was a little bit odd, and then you get used to it. And it's great. It's a great way to connect and to be around people. And I think one other aspect that's important is that we live in a world where children were born with screens and phones, and even myself now, I feel like it's so much easier to communicate with people through text because I don't have to give them my full attention and I can go on with my day. And human connection is so important. I'm from the countryside, and I remember when my parents' friends would just come knock on the door on a Saturday morning for coffee, and that was normal. Nowadays, if someone does that, I'm like, oh, I'm not expecting anyone. Who's there? And I have one friend, my friend Antoine, who will come by and just knock on the door, come in and have this real one-on-one interaction. And it makes such a big difference to be able to connect and authentically. And for children, I think it's very important where now it's all about video games and screen from such a young age, but it's important that as a family, they learn how to enjoy being outdoor, because if they build those healthy habits from a young age, they're much more likely to grow old and remain active and keep on playing outside, even though they're 80-year-old one day.
Yeah, so great, Joannie. It's true. You talk about, it reminded me of when you said that people ring the doorbell and who's there? Back in the day, right? It was just like people would just show up at your house. There is a comedian, Sebastian Maniscalco, and he has this little skit about companies coming or something. It's quite funny. So, Joannie, it's so wonderful to have you on the show today. J'espère que nous aurons l'occasion de nous rencontrer en personne quand je suis à Montréal, sur le sentier. That would be great. I would love to go for a trail walk sometime with you. And Pete, when you get back, obviously you're going to go out right now on the seawall, but when you come back to Toronto, I look forward to planning a walk and talk on the Martin Goodman Trail together.
I love the sound of it, my friend. I'll look forward to it. And now that, well, I guess we didn't really get much of winter this year, but now that it's even warming up from where it was, it'll be a beautiful day on the trail.
And I also want to thank TD Bank Group for being the official sponsor of Trail Talk Live and the Blas to Oz Winter Wellness Program. And thank you again so much, Joannie and Pete, for coming and talking to us today. Remember to get your friends and family out on the Trans-Canada Trail and turn your Blas into Oz. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.